Hey, welcome to the Science 8 video on the density formula. Now, first of all, density is really just how tightly packed matter is in a given amount of space. So if we take a look at this here, this has got relative density, this is a medium density, and this is high density. Now, all three of these are showing the same volume, but really it's how crowded things are within here. Now, typically, liquids are going to be less dense than solids, but more dense than gases, right? So you're going from less dense to more dense as you go from gas to liquid to solid, as in this diagram. If we take a look here, we have to remember that while this diagram on the left is two-dimensional, in fact, density is a three-dimensional construct because it's the three-dimensional space. And so here we see something with high density, very crowded, medium density as there's less particles in the same space, three dimensions, length, width, and height. And here we see something with low density where there's even less particles. So the formula for density is D is equal to M divided by V. Now, at this stage, typically we're going to use a non-algebraic approach to turn this formula into finding density, mass, and volume. So for this, let's just pretend for a moment that density is equal to 2, and I'm not going to worry about units here for the time being. We'll just go with it as we go along because we're really just worried about rearranging the formula. Mass if we figured 6, and volume if we figured is 3. Now, if we took a look at those numbers and substituted them in, we get the statement 2 is equal to 6 divided by 3. But let's say if I wanted the mass using 2, 6, and 3, how would I figure out 6? Well, if you said 6 is equal to 2 times 3, you're correct, which is the same as saying mass is equal to density multiplied by the volume. What if we go back to this original statement and we wanted to figure out the 3 using a 6 and the 2? Well, if you said that 3 is equal to 6 divided by 2, you'd be correct again. And that's volume for the 3 is equal to the mass divided by the density. So what we're going to do here is we're going to turn this formula and we're going to put it into a triangle. Okay, we're going to put density, mass, volume. Now, if we were to cover up the density, right, if we were to cover up the density, we have left with mass over volume. And so we're looking for density. We cross that out. That gets us mass and volume. And so we get to the point where density is equal to mass over volume for the formula. Now, using the same technique, okay, we're going to erase that. So we're drawing using the same technique. If we wanted to find mass, well, we had crossed them off and we got density and volume side by side. And so when we're doing things side by side, we're multiplying. And so that's mass is equal to density times volume because your triangle would look something like this. Well, if you're looking for volume, again, with the same triangle, crossing that off, you got M over V. And so V is equal to M over D. And the thing here is that it shows us that mass is always remaining on top. And so it's divided by density or volume. Unless we're looking for the mass, in which case you're multiplying the two. I'm hoping that makes sense, but let's take a look at a couple of examples. Okay, so for our first example, if we want to know what is the density, so density is what we're looking for, given the fact that the mass is 300 grams and the volume is equal to 15 milliliters. Now, mass is a measurement of how much matter there is, and the standard units is going to be kilograms or grams. Volume is a measure of how much space is being taken up, and that's three-dimensional space, length, width, height, and common units there are going to be milliliters or centimeters cubed. Now, there are obviously other units for these things, but these are kind of our standard ones. But if we're looking for density, what we're going to be doing is, first of all, just going straight to our formula. Now, you could put it also in the triangle, cross off D, but you're going to get density is equal to mass divided by volume. We're now going to substitute in our numbers. 300 grams divided by 15 milliliters. And when you do 300 divided by 15, you're going to get a value of 20. But we need units. Well, grams and milliliters are both there, and so the units are actually just grams per milliliter. Now, if this is a 1-mark question, then just the answer is sufficient. Right? All we're looking for in a 1-mark question is an answer, but that answer should have proper units. However, if it is a 3-mark question, 3-mark questions are going to require formula, work, and answer. And so if your question is 3 marks, I'm looking for more than just the answer, not just the answer. It's not because I'm thinking smart people need to have marks taken away from them or anything like that. It's really just I want you to be able to communicate how it is you got the answer, that you know that you could take a formula, substituting in the numbers, and getting the answer. And so take your cue for how much you need to show based on the number of marks. Let's go through a second example. In this example, we've got a density of 7.5 grams per milliliter and a volume of 10 milliliters. And we want to know what is the mass of this particular object. Well, taking a look at our triangle, density being mass over volume, and because we're looking for mass, we can discern that the equation, again, is density times volume. We're going to substitute in our numbers. Density has 7.5 grams per milliliter, and volume is 10 milliliters. Now, sometimes people are going to put an X in there. However, sometimes people find that confusing because it gets confused with the letter X or sometimes a unit. Sometimes people will use a dot to represent that, but a lot of people also confuse that with a decimal. So commonly, you will actually see things that are multiplied, just put where both the numbers are put in brackets as a common measure. Now, if you put the dot or the multiplication, I'm not going to mark it wrong at this level. However, just be aware that brackets also represents multiply. So we multiply these two numbers, we get 75. And so what are the units? Well, if density is in grams per milliliter, meaning 7.5 grams in each of the milliliters, and we had 10 milliliters, the mass is going to be 75 grams. And we take our cue here, again, from what we've been given in the information. Everything here is in grams, so our answer will be in grams as a standard unit for mass. Okay, let's do a third example. In this third example, the density is equal to 0.7 grams per milliliter, and the mass is 25 grams, and we want to know what the volume is. Okay, again, go into our triangle. Crossing off that, we see that volume is equal to mass over the density. The mass being 25 grams, the density being 0.7 grams per milliliter, means the volume is going to be, now when you type this into a calculator, right, you take 25 divided by 0.7, you get this number here. Notice it is larger than 25, which confuses some students. However, you're dividing into groups less than 1. So you're taking 25 grams and you're dividing into little piles of 0.7 grams each, which means you wind up with more than subsequent. Now, also notice we've got a huge number of decimal places. We're going to take our cue from the question and going to only one decimal place here because we've got one decimal place in the question. So 35.7 is going to be our number answer, 35.7. And the units for volume here, again, we're taking our cue from the question. Grams per milliliter means the volume should be in milliliters. Okay, I would like you to try this question. The density is 1.26 grams per centimeter cubed. The volume is 125 centimeters cubed, and we're looking for the mass. Okay, what you should do here is pause the video, give it a try, and then check your answer. Okay, so pause the video. Pause it now. Okay, welcome back. And you should have got that the mass was the density multiplied by the volume, which means you're going to multiply these two numbers together. And you wind up with a mass of 157.5, and the units is grams. Many people forget the units, but you cannot get full marks if you do not have units in your answer. And the main reason for this is because, well, if you just say 157.5, I don't know if you're talking about dollars or pounds or grams or centimeters cubed, right? It could be anything, even kitty cats. So make sure you put in your units. Let's try one more. Okay, in this question, you have a density of 2.70 grams per milliliter, a mass of 25 grams, and you're looking for the volume. Okay, so pause the video at this point, pause it now, and see how you do. Pause it. Okay, so using your triangle, you should have found volume is mass divided by density. Volume, therefore, 25 divided by 2.7, which means the volume is 9.26. Now, in the question here, we've got 2 decimal places. So I'm taking this to 2 decimal places. And if you take a look at your calculator, you may have noticed that you actually had 9.259259259. And so what we've done here is we've actually rounded this to that decimal place because it's closer to 9.26 than it is to 9.25 exactly. Okay, so hope that helps. Thanks for watching this video on density.